Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Becca. All right. First of all, we just want to thank you all for being here. So I'm Vanessa Valdez. I'm the community education advocate here at the YWCA, and we paired up with Dismas House and One Book, One Manchester to bring this event here because we really felt that it hit so many of the different missions of the people here in the room and the work that we do every day. So first we want to thank our lovely ladies over at Dismas House for the delicious breakfast you had this morning, all that hard work, and we also had a wonderful volunteer from Manchester Community College. So thank you ladies so much.
And so we are here. The title of this this meeting and Author's Brunch is Healing from the Past, Thriving in the Present, and Building Hope for the Future. And we thought that was the best words to encompass the themes of the novel that Gloria so graciously blessed us with, and the missions of both our programs. Yep. So Dismas Home of New Hampshire, not house.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Is a nonprofit whose mission is to empower previously incarcerated women that are transitioning and reentering into the community from correctional facilities around New Hampshire. Currently, we are 6 beds, expanding to 8 beds. In fact, the expansion starts this morning, so we're finally on our way. And these are women who have been currently diagnosed with substance use disorder and co-occurring mental illnesses that are associated with substance use, complex trauma, and repeated incarcerations. Dismas Home's a 4-phase holistic program that focuses on the first 2 phases is a low-intensity alcohol and drug rehabilitation residential, and when they finish their up to 90-day treatment, they can transition into a transitional living program, which then allows them to stay up to 10 months. And so the goal during phase 3 of that, which we call independence, is to regain their stability financially and economically, to get their lives on the right track, reorganize around their recovery, and work toward their transition reentry. And phase 4 is actual reentry back into the community. And at that point, our residents leave us. We hope that they have found safe, affordable housing, which I have to say is our biggest challenge right now in Manchester, and that they are financially, they're budgeting, and they are able to go out and be independent with resources, with wraparound services, and with support. And at any one time after they leave Dismas, they may come back for services or help. One of the other things that Dismas Home is currently starting is an outreach office for women, because we only have 8 beds, or 6 beds currently, for women that are in the community that don't have the resources, so that they would be able to come and get case management, and we could connect them to resources to help them stabilize their mental health, their physical health, their housing situation, their employment situation. And it's also part of a grant that for $2,500 and case management, we will help them get started with an apartment, or help them with furniture, or help them with utilities, or help them make up the difference between a really high rent and what they can afford. And it is a very small start, but it's our foray into the community as an outreach program. And I have to say that we've been doing the Cuckoo Land over the last month and a half, and all of my residents have lived this story, have connected personally, emotionally to this story, and every one of my residents has grown from this experience. So I want to thank you.
Okay, and here at the YMCA of New Hampshire, our mission... What? Did I say M?
Yes.
Okay, I'm fired. I literally never do that. This is my morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll blame it on the straw I'm not cooking. All right, the YWCA, I have my drawback. New Hampshire's mission is to eliminate racism and to empower women in order to attain the common vision of peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all people. In support of this mission, the YWCA New Hampshire provides services to meet critical needs, promote self-sufficiency, reduce violence, eliminate racism, and achieve equal opportunities for all people. We believe that working together, we can create a community where all families have a safe and stable place to live, all adults are economically self-sufficient, all children and youth develop the skills they need to succeed in life, and all people live with dignity, free from violence, racism, and discrimination. So that encompasses kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis here in our building. And I'm going to hand it off to the captain of our ship, Ms. Jessica Canton, to lead us off with the panel and discussion.
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to recover.
I will send you a fruit basket.
You don't understand, that's like my worst nightmare.
Don't worry, now mine
I'm being
too.
a little dramatic. So, as Vanessa shared, my name is Jessica Canton. I'm the CEO here at the YWCA, and as a girl, I always wanted to be Sally Jesse Raphael. I'm dating myself a little bit, so this opportunity to play talk show host this morning is pretty wonderful. And what Vanessa shared with you about what we do really centers around a social justice and empowerment model for our community, but the nitty-gritty of that is that we operate our Reach Crisis Services program. So on average, we serve, together with our partners in the community, about 12 victims, whether they be adults or children or families, a day. In our crisis services program. We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we operate the crisis line, and another program that we have that intersections with all of the social justice work and focus is we're in partnership with the Southern New Hampshire University for the Center for New Americans, which is an intergenerational program around supporting folks in our community that are often underserved and marginalized. So I'm very excited to have Gloria here today for professional reasons, obviously. I think her book lifts up the fabric of hope in a community and what a child can overcome in terms of the trauma they've experienced. Gloria's story, not exactly like my own, but I am also a survivor of childhood trauma, which I'm very proud to share with all of you. It's something I used to be ashamed of, guilty of, but I think that when we don't talk about these things, we perpetuate these kinds of things in our community. We push children like Gloria and myself and some of our other brave panelists more and more into the shadows. So I commend you for being able to tell your story so eloquently and beautifully and sharing it with all of us. We also have some really other esteemed guests with us today. And so first off, we have Lorinda Duquette, who's a resident of Dismas Home, a 51-year-old mother of 3 and a grandmother of 7 grandchildren. Yeah. Is being a grandmother better than being a mother?
It's very rewarding.
She, who has experienced loss, trauma, and grief, her addiction resulted in making poor choices. Her many incarcerations were mainly due to shoplifting to support her drug use. And after many thoughts of going into recovery, she finally acted on her desire and entered a 28-day program and was then referred to Dismas Home for extended 90-day low-intensity treatment. She is 2 months clean. And gaining the trust, love, and support of her family. And another brave soul sharing her story with us today. Kelly Collins is our next guest. She's 47 years old. She is an alcoholic and drug addict. She also has suffered from depression and anxiety all her life. She lived in a very dysfunctional family. There was a lot of domestic violence that stemmed from her alcoholic, mentally and physically abusive father. Kelly started drinking at the age of 16 years old, which was accepted by her father. It became her way of coping throughout her life, and there was no self-esteem, no self-respect, and most of all, she had no confidence in anything. She determined that using was her only way out. She has experienced multiple incarcerations resulting from blackouts. It was her last arrest that introduced her to Dismas Home. She is 7 months clean. Working hard on her recovery. The Dismas Home has opened her eyes to many opportunities without having to use. She can now be there for her daughter, who is also experiencing depression and anxiety. Together they live the life they've always wanted. And so I did share their stories verbatim as how they wrote them, and I think it's important that when you have your story that you own it and it's told in your voice. Christina Toth, and did I say that right?
Toth.
Toth, sorry, is the administrator of the Family Connection Center at the New Hampshire Department of Corrections. In 1998, Christina created, in partnership with the University of New Hampshire, one of the first family resource centers that is located in a state prison. How cool is that? The FCC currently has centers in all 3 New Hampshire prisons and minimum security units. The FCC partners with private and other state agencies to educate and support incarcerated fathers and mothers, their children and their children's caregivers during their entire sentence. The goal is to create and or maintain healthy family relationships during the tumultuous time of parents' incarceration. That just warms my heart tremendously because from a child development perspective, there's so many good outcomes attached to that. Mrs. Toth is a Leadership New Hampshire alum, was selected for the Union Leaders 40 Under 40 designation in 2008, was awarded the Exemplary Leadership and Service Award by New Hampshire Division of Health and Human Services in 2011, and in 2019 was awarded the Robert Chamberlain Award, which is given to a professional who has had a statewide impact on children and families in New Hampshire for over 10 years. She has co-published several articles on the Family Connection Centers and speaks at many statewide conferences on the subject. She serves on the New Hampshire Wellness and Primary Prevention Council for the New Hampshire State Legislature. She earned a BA and started her master's at the University of New Hampshire and has worked over 25 years in state and private corrections in New Hampshire and Colorado. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Brittany Fontone is our, I say our because Unspoken Health took her from us. No, I'm just kidding. Brittany actually went on to expand and focus on the Adverse Childhood Experiences Response Team, ACERT work, as a family advocate for the Unspoken Health. She was previously here at the YW, as I mentioned, and she's been working with the team in some capacity for 3 years. So essentially the entire time this project has been up and running, and if you haven't heard about ACERT, Lara and Mary are here. It's a wonderful, innovative project that's getting a lot of national attention, and it's pretty exciting that it started all here in this community, given what we're here to talk about today that also happened in this community. She holds a bachelor's degree in social work from the University of New Hampshire. Welcome, Brittany. Detective Pete Flanagan has served on the Manchester Police Department for 8 years and in the domestic violence for 4 years. And that is the entirety of his biography. But I want to put a plug in at the innovative work that the Manchester Police Department is doing, not only around addressing domestic violence in our community, but also addressing childhood trauma. And the fact that Pete has been working in the domestic violence unit for 4 years, I think is very remarkable and speaks to his dedication to this work and ensuring that these families are supported and these individuals experiencing this violence in our community are supported. So I added some stuff.
Well said, thank you.
And do you want to hear a little bit more about the author? Gloria Norris, certainly last but not least, grew up in the projects of Manchester, New Hampshire with her parents, her sister Virginia, and her cat Sylvester in the 1960s. Gloria's unconventional coming-of-age memoir jangles with electricity and suspense, and it sure does. The story that unfolds is a profound portrait of how violence echoes through a family and through a community. From the tragedy, Gloria finds a way to carve out a future on her own terms and ends up just where she wants to be. And so I look forward to hearing more about that. So, they've given me some questions to ask you all. So the first question is stems around how do you all think that traumatic adverse childhood experiences impact the trajectory of someone's life? Nothing heavy for a Friday morning.
Well, what can you say? You know, those are the years, the formative years from, you know, babies to toddlers and to, you know, 9 years old, which is primarily, you know, the chunk of my book that I write about from in the 9-year-old voice. I will, sure. I will project, and yes, and she will close that door, and we're gonna do this. Sorry, I will speak up. I'll project. You know, I've spoken at this is the 10th thing I've done this week. Wow. And so my voice might be a little softer than it was on Sunday, but you know, grateful, so grateful to contribute to everything, and boy, it gives you as much back as you give. So, I have spent my entire life in therapy. I say that, very proudly. When I was young, I think, it was kind of a shameful thing. Oh, nobody, and certainly there's still some elements of that when you think about, politicians and how they still probably wouldn't want to admit that. But, therapy, I think, you got to do it if you've had this kind of trauma. And it can manifest in a number of ways. I've spent a long time in the 12-step programs. I'm a big believer in 12-step programs. Otherwise, the trauma is going to carry through in your life. And it does anyway. Even with all the therapy in the world, all the 12 steps in the world, that's why I call my book Cuckoo Land. The last line, the spoiler for you or whoever else who hasn't read it, but, I say sometimes I still call it Cuckoo Land, which was one of my father's words. It was his, description or his word for California, because he thought crazy, wild, free-spirited people, lived out there. And, his words, his thoughts, his actions, they're in me, and they are always going to be. You just have to kind of accept that. But it's a question of how much it, rules your life and influences your decisions, and I really am an example of how you can live with that kind of abuse, terrible abuse I experienced as a kid. And my mother, just awful, guns shot in the house and everything. And you can still go on to, live a good life and have a good relationship. My husband's here with me. 23 years we've been married. His name is the same as my father's, James. But we don't call him Jimmy too much, except in a jokey way. But he is like the, polar opposite of my father.
Well, thank goodness.
But I had to wait until I was like 40-ish to find him and know that I could make a good choice. So anyway, it can be done. You have it with you, but you exceed what your, the life your parents had and what was written for you from that trauma. Doesn't have to be your story.
I don't know who would want to follow that, but
I can say I'll say from a police standpoint along those lines. I've been in this with the Manchester Police Department for 8 years, so some of the calls that we go to with domestic violence, a lot of times it's repeat calls of the same house, same addresses, same families. And being a police officer here for 8 years, you can sometimes see that these children, they're either witnesses or victims of domestic violence, transition through, just in the time I've been here, 8, 9, 10 to teens. And they sometimes will transition from being witnesses or victims to offender lifestyles, or they get involved in runaways or missing or some type of substance abuse. And those kids often come from these addresses that we frequently go to where there is domestic violence. Which is why when the ASAP program came about, I thought it was a great idea, because it can attempt to kind of, first of all, recognize for the police officers that these children are victims and they are witnessing this, which, I'm sure everyone here knows that police don't always view people as either a victim or an involved party. They sometimes view it as a call. So when they go to a call, they don't really personalize anyone. They just know that something has to be done, something was reported, and there's no personal relationship with anyone involved. But when you take something like the ASAP program, you realize that these kids are victims and that they do need attention and that they shouldn't just be left over in the corner and not really kind of disregarded while you speak to the adults. But from my own point of view, you can see these kids that grow up in these environments transition through this process, and then when they get to the teens or early adults, they can become offenders or suspects in types of domestic violence situations themselves.
I'll just add that after over 23 years and working in the state prison system is everyone I've worked with in all capacities have had similar backgrounds. Like, they're just repeating the same cycle over and over. So not everyone who has those backgrounds ends up in prison, obviously. But without intervention for both the child and for the parent, that cycle can be easily followed.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot as a community about generational poverty, but we don't talk a lot about generational trauma and how it can really carry on, and you can inherit that kind of trauma. Do either of you want to speak to your own experiences and how you think?
Yeah, like I never expected that I would be an addict and live the life I'm living, and I certainly didn't realize that it started at a young age. I just thought that was a normal way to live, and every party, every family function I went to had alcohol and pot and other drugs that I didn't witness, but I'm sure they were there. So I never realized that, and then when I had some significant loss, I turned to drugs, and that was my way of coping. And now that I'm getting help, it's a tremendous feeling to know that life doesn't have to be that chaotic, and life can actually be good. So thanks to the Dismiss Home and my 28-day program, I'm heading in the right direction and learning how to deal with everything without drugs.
Yeah.
So it's a much better life.
It can be very empowering when you make those connections that it's
Yeah.
not all your fault, right?
Right.
That some of this
Absolutely.
happened before you could even figure out what was happening, and it
Yeah.
shaped. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Do you want to share anything?
Growing up as a child, we didn't believe in talking to the police. So my house was super crazy. Yeah,
The same thing, right?
yeah. So everything was a secret.
Don't be a snitch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Don't be a family snitch.
Exactly. So it was really hard, but you get so adapted to it that it just feels normal,
Feels normal.
every day.
Yeah.
So when I got into my young teens, my mom had left my father, and me and my brother went to live with her, and it was so quiet and peaceful that I couldn't even handle it. And that's where all my panic and stress came in, and depression. I just couldn't handle living like that. So that led a lot to me drinking and using drugs, and it really, my life really got screwed up for a while. It's been a long road. But I'm lucky that I got introduced to the Dismiss Home, because now my daughter doesn't have to live like that, and she's 16, so she's at a very vulnerable age, and I'm so happy that I can be there for her mentally, and she doesn't do drugs or drink, and I want to keep it like that.
Yeah.
And she's just now start medication, and she's doing so much better. I didn't realize I had such an impact on her when she was little. She has a lot of trust issues,
Yeah.
but I'm starting to gain that trust back with her.
Yeah, and that's the awesome thing about this is that it's not a sentence, right? It's not how your life needs to turn out, and you can restart at any point. I mean, for me, I was 35 when I made all the connections, so you know, you're truly what you're talking about is very inspirational, and just keep going.
Because
Sorry.
like I just thought I was at that age. I'm like, why even bother? You know, I'm already in my 40s. My life is over. But Sarah showed me and taught me that, you know, my life could just begin
Yeah.
and be awesome.
Yes. Yes, it can. Brittany, I know you're a woman of few words.
Yeah, so I mean, trauma has lots of impacts on kids and how they're going to grow up, and that's what's really cool about our program, ACERT, is, and you mentioned being afraid of the police. You're not supposed to talk to the police, and even if we're going to a home and they're not necessarily wanting to use our services or use the programs that we're referring, at least we're giving them that positive experience of a police officer at their door. It's not a negative thing. You know, and most of the police officers we work with, they're so good with the kids, they'll go right in and like hang out with them while like I'm talking to the parents. So at least they get that positive experience, which could at least, you know, make a relationship so further down the line that they're more likely to reach out to the police if they need to, and just give them that positive experience.
I wanted to say something about anger, because, you know, I didn't have just the luck of the draw, the substance abuse drinking thing. My sister did. You know, a lot of people ask me after, you know, reading the book, how, you know, how's your sister? What's she doing? Because that kind of came just as the book was finishing, and unfortunately, she passed away. She drank herself to death.
So sorry.
Yeah. And she got to see the book. She got to read the manuscript and knew that I had sold it, but I didn't actually see the physical book. But talk about one trauma. She didn't have a history of that, really. I mean, she had other issues. She was, worked in a massage parlor, which is prostitution, and did phone sex. But she was, doing her best to raise her son and try, not drinking like that. And then her husband left her, and she disappeared down a black hole of alcoholism. She just drank, and so that I didn't have that. But what I did have was anger, and I just think there's so much residual anger. I don't know if you experience that, and we don't talk about that with women because women aren't supposed to get mad. You have anger management treatment for men because they're the abusers, and you got to learn to control your anger. Women have anger too. In a way, it's, why isn't every woman angry? I say, we're mad as hell. We're not taking it anymore. Absolutely, but that's some good anger. There's a book out about women's anger right now that's like the good anger that I love. But I had the bad anger because it was impacting relationships for me. And I didn't, I just didn't even really know I had it, but it would just come out like, whoa. So that was a lot of what I worked on in therapy. That was my sort of, substance that I had to try to gain a handle on, was my anger.
That's a very compelling statement, because I think a lot of childhood trauma survivors really struggle with sort of this hypersensitivity to fight or flight. We kick into it very fast, which is, we're always sort of poised for battle because we want to try to be able to control what we've experienced. And so thinking about what you said and sort of building off of it is, how do you all think that domestic violence affects the fabric of a family, and particularly children? And we've been speaking to this a little bit, but I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that question.
Well, anger.
Yeah.
I mean, you're either going to identify with, the abuser or the abused. And it's not, neither one is a good choice. But I didn't want to be the abused, so I just developed more of that personality in the book of like, I'm going to be a tough guy like my father because I don't want to be the other side of it, the equation. It's a terrifying thing to live in a home with that, and especially, guns. My father we had a lot of guns around, and I think the statistic is 50 women a month are shot to death in America. We're not talking stranglings or stabbings or the ones that don't die, they just get wounded or whatever. But it's such an epidemic, and so. Okay, I could talk for 3,000 hours about that. This is like my issue.
Yes.
So, but I want to hear what everybody else has to say about it.
I think from my previous work with domestic violence, one of the biggest things was the unspoken rules that they had in the household, and how those affected the kids and how they grew up with that, and then how that kind of played out with their life outside of the home and how those continued and things like that. So they were constantly on edge, high alert, and things like that. They couldn't say certain things, do certain things, but just following those unspoken rules of the household.
Yeah, it's interesting to characterize it in that way, these unspoken rules, but that's what is rooted in that is sort of like the secrecy and shame and guilt of all of this and internalization because of the relationship developmentally between the parent and the child, right? The child trying to make sense out of why is this person that was put on this earth to protect me and care for me, why are they struggling to do that and not having the words to share that? Detective Flanagan, do you have any insight in terms of, from a law enforcement perspective, I know you've mentioned that going into the home sometimes you struggle to see, sometimes officers struggle to see it as a person, as a client, it's more of a call, but how do you see this impacting the fabric of our families here in Manchester?
Well, kind of what everyone touched on about, the kids are raised in a certain way where they will identify with the victim or the abuser, and in some cases when we go to call, the neighbors will call and the victim doesn't want to report anything to the police. We tend to try to not put the children in the middle where we have to make them divulge what actually occurred so we can take action if action is necessary. But sometimes the children will take the lead. You'll show up and they won't want you in the house. They won't want you to talk to either of their parents. And they'll instantly go on the defensive because, you know, they don't want one of their parents to get arrested, or they don't want their mother to be angry with them, or whatever the scenario might be. So I think it's just something over time that, one, police probably need to be a little bit softer, I guess, in the approach, and make people realize that we don't just see them as an object, and that it's a call for service, that things are personalized, and that children can have a good relationship with police before, I don't want to say it's too late, but before they're almost at a point of no return where they don't want to talk to the police, or they don't want anyone in the family talking to the police, or it becomes a lack of cooperation.
Thank you. And Christina, do you see anything? I know part of the work you've done is to offer family resource centers inside of prisons, and do you want to speak to sort of like how you see it impacting the family, whether positive or negative?
Yeah, not much positive. I think it's just a huge burden, as everyone's already saying, on the children, because generally you got to side with one parent or the other, and then you have the guilt over that, and then you got to keep it a secret, so that the burden is just unbelievable on those children. So it's a wonder that they mentally survive all that. So intervention, family counseling is, I think, the biggest thing that can happen for those families, and at the same time the children's worried about their family, even as dysfunctional as it is, it's still their family and they love them, and they're worried about it being torn apart, so that's why they get defensive and they're not going to tell the police anything and don't come into our house. So it's actually destructive for families, definitely.
I will add too, actually, that I probably should have touched on. When I started here, if you went to a domestic violence call, the children were never recognized. If they weren't involved in some way, shape, or form, you didn't even put them in the report. So when the reports were generated, no one would know the kids were either present or witnessed it or even involved. I mean, there was, among police, you did really try to limit any child involvement in the domestic. You just try to go off of what either the neighbor said or what some witness or one of the adults would say. And you didn't want to have the kid in the middle because you didn't want them to have to be referred to by the courts. But now, obviously, it's vital to have them at least documented in some way, shape, or form, so resources can attempt to be, given to the children.
Yeah, and for all us data geeks in the room, Brittany, roughly how many children have been impacted by the ACERT program since its inception?
1,100.
I might alarm you. 1,100 children in what, 3 years, Lara? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's 1,100 children that would have been otherwise invisible in our community unless they were being touched by other service providers. Do you all want to, I know you all spoke very fondly of your children and have done a lot of work in this space and are very looking forward to sort of rebuilding and enjoying.
I will say that I did grow up with a lot of that I also felt necessary to protect my mom, because she was the one that was bloodied and we were the ones walking down the road in the middle of the night, and then the next day they would be fine. Like it all started with the alcohol, and unfortunately my mother, they ended up fighting so bad one night on the way home from a wedding because he was jealous. He took the steering wheel from my mother, they crashed into the guardrails, and a few months later it caused a blood clot and traveled to her heart and killed her. Oh. So she was only 33. So that stems from, I've always blamed it on that. I know that, and she went back to work too soon, because back then you didn't need a note to go back. So she went back. She had 5 kids to raise. So unfortunately, she lost her life eventually over it. I still talk to my stepdad today, but I'm angry over them years,
Yeah, and I think that you also are highlighting an important issue of there's a disproportionate amount of homicides in New Hampshire that are domestic violence related. In fact, we've had 27 this year statewide, I think roughly, and about 13 or 14 of those have been domestic violence related. So not as sort of staggering numbers as California, but when you put it into if you compare it to our state size and that sort, it's a very troubling statistic that we also don't talk a lot about. We often will categorize these things as murder-suicides or, something of that nature. Kelly, did you want to add anything?
So, growing up in my house, my mom worked and my dad worked. My mom worked nights. So we wouldn't tell her anything about my dad. while he was with us at nighttime, because he was awful. And because she would have to experience the physical part of it from him, because she would be trying to justify his actions, and it would just turn messy because of his drinking. So, like one experience, when I was 11 years old, because of that, my mother and father started fighting really bad, and he was hurting her. And when I was 11, I had picked up a knife out of the kitchen and I stabbed him. And it was not to be reported. He didn't go to the hospital. So that type of living was my whole life. So it was really normal to me to do stuff like that. And we were afraid to tell because we didn't want to lose our parents. And like, I think parents who are addicted and have alcohol problems, I think they should immediately have to, this is just my opinion, have to get some type of parenting counseling classes before they, maybe while they're pregnant, so the kids don't have to fear talking to the police and be able to, be confident enough to express if they're being hurt or if their parents are being hurt, because no kids today or way back then, they don't want to say anything. And that's where it comes into a lot.
Yeah.
Right, they have to know that it's affecting the child. I mean, they can't be that stupid at that time, but they are.
Well,
So, a lot-
yes, it's, I think you raise a good point, right? It's, it's not intentional ignorance, it's as much as it is just trying to like deal with your own stuff. And yeah, I think you also make a really good point about, the fact of like how when you went to live with a place that was much calmer, it was actually had a reverse effect on you. And I think this is also an unintended consequence that we often don't think about with children who've experienced trauma, is that warm and nurturing responses don't feel normal, so they also sometimes can feel threatening. And I've, had experience in that in my own personal relationships. But I want to keep us going so that the audience has time to ask questions. How does having incarcerated parents affect the decision-making process, would you say, in terms of, the criminality component, the addiction component, the cycle of all of that?
How does having an incarcerated parent affect the child?
Yeah, the decision-making process around parenting and, life, navigating life.
So we've experienced, every family is so different,
Yes.
from socioeconomic and just the makeup,
Yeah.
but I think the general public is surprised to learn that a lot of the incarcerated parents are still affecting decisions in the household. Like sometimes they're the ones making it from prison or jail or wherever. And it doesn't matter whether mom or grandmother's raising the children, maternal or paternal grandparents. A lot of times they have a great influence, which is one reason we created our program, to teach them parenting while they're in prison, because they are parenting from the prison, so they do have a great effect.
I have to agree with you. Anyone else want to jump in on that question?
Well, we've seen sometimes the victim ends up wanting to recant or no longer go along with the process because the offender is the income earner, and that they end up losing out the entire household income as long as he's incarcerated. And sometimes the victim finds out that not only is he only not going to be locked up for a couple of days, but he could be looking at a lengthy sentence, and they don't want to cooperate because they don't know what they're going to do for money, if he goes to prison for an X number of months or years.
Yeah.
So it becomes a dilemma.
Yeah, well, that brings up something that's sort of on a grander scale, that, women are not paid as well as men. It starts with all these situations, it's not, they tend to not make as much money as men, and so they're more vulnerable because of that. If we could fix some of these other problems, it might really impact. Not all the time. My mother actually had a job, also the night shift in a factory, so she was making more money, but he would take her money, so she didn't really have a chance to kind of build up too much of a nest egg. But even if she had, she was afraid to leave, and he would have shot her to death, and I believe that. But it's not the case in all. You've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start with having some resources, whether it's, back then there was no domestic violence shelters and everything, and New Hampshire kind of, from my research, I think it lagged on that pretty badly, even way into the 70s. You know, there was like a governor's commission on domestic violence. They wanted to see if they could get the first shelter here. And they said, there was a quote, I don't know if I can get it exactly, but they said those women libbers, they really, you know, pissed the hell out of their husbands. So no, we're not going to do it. You know, that was a governor's commission.
Yeah.
So, you know, but we have to get other, you know, everything is interconnected. And, you know, if women can, you know, make more money, they can have more independence. But you hear that all the time with domestic violence things.
Yeah.
Even, you know, even with celebrities, right, or sports figures, you know, it's like, okay, well, he's got the big, you know, salary, and she doesn't, you know, show up, or she
Right.
doesn't, you know, won't speak up and say, yes, he did this. Because there's such a feeling of financial vulnerability we women have. And it's the same thing in divorces. Who fares worse? Usually the woman has more of a problem, even though, you know, there's a lot of men who say, oh, she took me to the cleaners, you know, that thing. Well, you know, I don't know. They're the single mothers. They're the ones raising the kids for the most part, trying to get some support. So it kind of starts with that, financial. There's a lot that goes on that fulcrum of economics that we can really affect things that way.
I'm at the point in the book around the boat trip, and when you were talking, the note that your dad left your mom, you know, took the brats fishing,
Yeah.
I'll wake you up in time to make the mackerel.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, working for a women's organization, you really sort of like, you know, you're even more hypersensitive to gender roles, but I was like, wow, like, I don't know why that note resonated with me, but it just, it speaks to exactly what you're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
and the women, they're overworked. Let's face it, we still also, the gender issue is really important in this. We do more of the housework still, you know, so they're just overworked and they're beaten down, and you don't have the chance to, you don't have the energy to fight back psychologically and everything. You know, my mother was the night shift, and then he wanted her to go to the racetrack, so she and she'd have to make the breakfast for us. Maybe she'd get 2 hours of sleep before he'd say, I want you to come with me here. And whatever he did, you know, whatever he said, she did. And also, you know, she didn't drive and all of that. It was like, you know, she might as well have been in Saudi Arabia, where everything was controlled. So, you know, I don't know, I don't want to.
No, it's important thoughts. So, how much time do we have left, Vanessa?
We got 10.
10 minutes. Okay, wow.
We could have talked for hours.
We could have talked for hours.
You
I
guys
feel like
would
this
be
went by
hungry
really
for lunch.
fast. But let's use the last 10 minutes to sort of have you all join the conversation. Is there anyone that has a question or something they want to share with the panel?
We have one over here too.
Okay, we'll hear and then we'll go here. Yeah.
I want to introduce myself. My name is Deli Champagne, and I'm with the New Hampshire Children's Behavioral Health Collaborative. We are a policy and advocacy organization, and we are fighting in Concord on behalf of children. And we just had a very big win, and the governor signed it into law June 3rd. It's Senate Bill 14. It's going to transform the way we serve children in this state who have social emotional needs. But I wanted to let you know the upcoming session, we have 2 bills around creating more supports for kids in schools. So we are getting schools on board. And I'm going to need your help to go to the legislature to say, this is important. We need more social workers, more school counselors, more social emotional programs. Right now we have something in our school called multi-tiered systems of support for behavioral health and wellness. The acronym is MTSSB, and we have it in pockets throughout the state, and where it's being done, the results are incredible. We need it done statewide. We asked the state to give us some seed money so that districts could take it on, and in the last session that got voted down. We only asked for $5 million. I need your support, I need your help to let the legislature know that we need to get these schools on board to address the needs of these kids, because their needs are not being met in the home and they spend so much time at school. So please check out our...
What can we do to support you?
All right, so check out our website. It's nh4youth.org. My name is Deli Champagne. Contact me, and I will work with you. I'm going to go to the Dismas home. Sarah's going to let me come in next month, and I'm going to work with the ladies. Hopefully they'll want to share their stories. I'll put a storybook together. I'll hand it to all 424 legislators and say, this is the reality of what's happening in New Hampshire. Wake up and make the change. So I'm going to need your help.
Thank you.
Senate Bill 14 was signed into law. It had a $20 million appropriation, and it passed in the budget. So now we have mobile crisis statewide for kids. If a kid is in crisis, they can call a number, and a clinician will go to the home within 1 hour. So the RFP is going out to hire the organization that's going to do that. It's going to be statewide. This is huge and transformative. The clinician will also go to the school, meet the child where the child is at, and learn about what the child has going on, and then give those child the services and supports the child needs. So the bill is huge. There's a lot more in the bill than that, but you can check it out on our website. Very exciting things going on that you probably aren't even aware of. We're a small organization, but we are mighty. And we do not, we push and push and push. Yes, I go 95 miles an hour. I don't take no for an answer. I'm going to push for children. I care about kids just like you do.
Kelly, I think you're in good company.
Yeah.
We all need to lift each other up. Thank you. And we had a question over here.
Yeah, I'm on the board of this, as said them to start with, so I know these stories and it's interesting. But I also do volunteer work as a guardian ad litem for abused children. One of the things that concerns me really is how to prevent things from going downhill. And you look at all the barriers. First of all, the abuser does not want to accept services. It does not want to admit any problems. Does not want any intervention. Is fearful of that. And spouses support that. So the question really is, how can we better essentially force intervention in order to prevent the deterioration over time for children? Do you have any ideas?
Well, you know, the only thing that comes to my mind right now is just, we got to try with the men. You know, it's starting, I mean, I had to be sort of, you know, one size fits all, but it is mostly in that direction. And so, you know, I was saying I went to the men's jail this week and I spoke, there were, you know, a lot of men who they gave the book to read, and a number of them were abusers, just trying to, you know, start with that. And also, you know, we have to speak up in our communities. I think when you hear someone, you know, address their wife or husband or whatever in a way that, you know, doesn't sound good, you know, speak up, you know, just in life. I think we're also feel it's such a shameful thing and we don't want to get involved, you know. And it is dangerous, obviously. Sometimes, you know, people can be angry and, you know, you hear these stories about bystanders, you know, but I think what are our choices except get involved? You have to try. There was there was a store, those of you who are older in Manchester know, Galone's Market. Did anyone remember that place? There was a man in that market. We used to go in there with my father, and he was friends with him. And, you know, the guy would give me candy. He was just a kind, sweet person, Iggy. And all of a sudden, we couldn't go in there anymore. And I'd say, Dad, I don't want to go. And he'd be, we're not going there. And my mother told me that he had confronted my father. He had said, you must not speak to your wife that way. You must not treat your children that way. Or I cannot continue to be friends with you. I cannot, you know, continue. You've got to get some help. You've got to do it, whatever. You know, in my father's case, it didn't work, but sometimes it would. You know, it really is like intervention. You know, we can do an intervention. We've got to, you know, see it and call it out. You know, that's one aspect that I see.
There's actually a YW in Lawrence, Massachusetts that's launched a pilot program that is doing work, and they call it people who abuse. So, and they do work in this space, but I think the rub is that generally speaking, crisis services programs don't serve abusers, right? So you can't serve victims and abusers in the same space, but you make like kind of some compelling things to think about, and I think we have to be constantly sort of evolving in our thought. But does anyone else want to share what they, to his question? about
Men
what-
are abused too.
Yeah,
A lot of
they
the
are.
abusers have been abused.
Yes.
So if we can bring that empathy to them and try to, develop some, places for them to go.
Yeah.
Can I answer his question? So we have a law in New Hampshire. It was put on the books in 2016. It's 135F, and it's the System of Care Law for Children. And that law has 3 values in it, and the primary value in that law is we will build up a community-based system. So it is now up to the state, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education, to build up programs within the state to serve children. It is now state law. So hold your legislators and your governor accountable to build up these programs for our children.
Yes.
What is that statute again?
All
135F.
right. That's such an important part of this too. The whole thing is the policy and legislation, and we have a couple of questions in the back.
I have a question for you folk who have lived through these situations. Do you feel you would have been better off if you were removed from the home?
I would have fought that every step of the way. I would have never wanted to be removed, even though I was feeling that. I still love both of my parents, and I would have fought that. I know personally I would have.
I think I would have, I'm sorry.
Go.
I feel like I would have been better off because I would have had a chance in my life to become something.
Oh, I know I would have been
at my
better
age,
off,
I'm
too,
still. I feel like I wasted a lot of my life because I'm just now getting better. But yeah, at least I would have stood some type of chance.
Boy, that is a great question. I think I also would have fought it. I don't think I know I would have fought it because I did have a bond with my mother. At least I did have that I knew I was loved by her. But on balance, would I have been better had I been removed? Possibly, yes. So I guess I wish that there had been somebody, who had at least raised the issue and maybe scared them that they were going to have their
Some
kid
more
taken away,
similarities.
scared straight with parents,
Right.
But the
That
goal
maybe-
is not to remove the child, the goal is to fix the family.
Yeah.
We need to go in and help mom and dad so kids,
But
Because
sometimes
they
it's
wanna-
just so damn bad.
yeah,
you
but they
can't-
want to stay with their families. So temporarily, sure,
Yeah.
but we've got to fix the family.
And to touch on, I just wanted to touch on this question. If you use the word force, the only way you could actually force it is you'd have to make it a condition of bail. If the person was arrested and you wanted to be released on bail, then that training would have to be a condition of bail, that if they didn't complete the training, then you could violate the bail and revoke it.
I don't want to be a downer, but my father really never changed. I mean, he had therapy too. He was like a Tony Soprano. He went to therapy while I was young. We'd go to Massachusetts. He didn't want people to know,
Right,
but
I
in
read
chunks
that,
of
yeah.
time, like 11 years, he was with one therapist, and he was with a psychiatrist here in Manchester toward the end of his life, who I interviewed when I did the book and everything. And the shocking thing was, he said to, I wrote to him online. I tracked him down. I said, my name's Gloria Norris. My father, Jimmy, was one of your patients. He said, wrote me back, your father was my favorite patient. I'd love to talk to you. So I ended up going there. I had actually had a letter that he had written when my father was arrested for domestic violence, trying to strangle my mother to death and everything. And he wrote a letter at the time in support of my father, saying that he's never been violent. They have a loving relationship. And my father had been going to him for 11 years. You've got to see what some people who are sociopathic,
Yes.
they will not tell the truth. And they can pull the wool over a psychiatrist's eyes for 11 years. This is a one-time incident, he said. And my father served no time and he paid like a $200 fine or whatever. And part of it was because of this psychiatrist who was so charmed by my father, because a lot of these people are charming, they're not just all gruff, you know, so-and-so's. A lot of drunk people, whoever, they're charming. I love them myself. But, you know, he didn't even see it. So, and right to the end of my father's life, the one thing he wanted to do was try to go back, if he was strong enough, and kill the policeman who had arrested him. He kept talking about that, right up like until weeks before. If I could get out of this chair, I would go. I have nothing to lose now because I'm dying.
Right.
And I'm like, God, I'm glad they took his guns away. Whatever. And I have to say, 2 weeks after he died, I got a letter from the police department saying, your gun, because there was like a 7-year period or something where you can't get the gun. They held on to it. They're like, what do you want? Do you want it? Whatever. So I went down there, and I went and I looked at the thing. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I just said, melt it down. Get rid of that thing. But he didn't change, you know. So sometimes you have to take the kids out of there, and because it's I don't know.
I appreciate you saying that, because earlier you were talking about how you either become the abused or the abuser. And I think there's an element to the abuser, otherwise known as narcissists, that really are very adept at being sociopathic, and most of the time their community, their friends or family do not view them in that way, and they're very manipulative, and so I think that I appreciate what you're saying. I understand the importance of keeping the family intact, but you know,
we're here because it's tricky.
It's tricky.
It's tricky.
Humans are tricky.
There's no answer that's going to be one size fits all.
Yes.
We've got to try.
Yeah.
Try is the word, and we will succeed. I am an example of somebody that can live in that situation, come out, have a good marriage, write a book, and try to help other people. So we all, we can do it. We can try, and clearly things in the state are better. This man, there was nobody like him, I mean, it's a marvel to me what you're doing, and I'm just thank you for what you're doing.
I have my flaws too. I'm not.
I'm flawed. We're all flawed. We all have to raise our hands. We're the flawed people, all of us. So, but I mean, you are doing such important work, and I really, so pleased that you're there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Just had one for Gloria. Why in the book did you not ever refer to your parents as mom and dad?
Everybody asks me that. It's just
curious.
It's not like I never did call them mom and dad, but it was kind of a playful thing we did in the family. And I did it till the end of their lives.
Oh, you did? You called them
Jimmy, Shirley, yes.
Okay.
It was a kind of a playful. There was one of actually kind of the good thing, I know it seems weird, but families are weird. What can I say?
Yeah.
Over here, and then did you have something else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Less of a question, just more of a comment. Given how complex this situation is, I just want to commend this panel in terms of its breadth and representing so many different aspects and voices and perspectives on these complex issues. I feel like we need more conversations like this one in order to address these problems. So.
She's agreed to come back.
I will. Anytime. I will. Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
I wanted, also just say the YWCA, they are really, I mean, I don't know, they're like on the cutting edge of this, they are really leading the charge all over this country. I did a speech in Spokane, the same thing. It was about domestic violence. We are, they are an organization that I think I associated with going swimming or something, I didn't know I never thought about
them. Well, we still do help people to swim, just not physically.
I never, yes, but I mean, wow, they're doing some good stuff, so I hope they'll continue, and that you guys will tell your friends about this experience, and maybe we'll have some more dialogue and just keep it going, not once a year or whatever, but often. Let's do this.
Let's do it, yeah.
I just wanted to also make a comment to support what both Kellys said in terms of being afraid to go to the police. Kelly talked about the need for community network of support that Kelly talked about.
With Lorinda and Kelly.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. I was confused for a minute because I'm horrible with names.
the point about being afraid to go to police can't be the only resource. That you should have been able to go to a teacher. You should have been able to go to a neighbor or someone in the community. We need that network. And if police are the only resource that's out there, children won't use it. They won't go there. But we need to educate teachers. We need to educate the public. We need to educate anyone who comes in contact, pediatricians, nurses, anyone who comes in contact with children, to be sensitive to understanding what some cues might be that something isn't right, and to at least build a trusting network for kids to be able to come forward and say, this is happening to me. Not expect it all to be law enforcement. And law enforcement does a great job, but there is that barrier that some people just won't call. It takes a village. Yeah, so I just wanted to make that observation.
Well, again, I have to say, tricky. Tricky for me is the opposite word. That's the key word. Because teachers or people did say, try to kind of say, "Are you okay?" to me, like in the principal's office and things like that. I would show up with the red eyes, crying, and whatever. But I always just said, "I'm fine." Right? I mean, right? Didn't you do it? Yes. Just, I'm fine. I had to study for a test, or I got a cold, and I'm, but I'm good. I'm fine. There were people. I think you have to kind of go a little bit more, but then you get into the thing of like privacy and whatever. How much can teachers really do? They're in a tricky position. So I don't know how that all works, but obviously people have to try and go the extra mile. But it is tricky because you don't want to tell people,
exactly,
whoever, right?
Yeah. You know how you were saying about your dad's psychiatrist with him. When I was a little girl, my father used to say to me, because he had to go there too, and he used to tell me, if you came in the room with me while talking to my psychiatrist, I will have him believing they're not even sitting right here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Good one. And he would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that reminded me of that when you were saying about the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
There's a really intensive program. It's called Multisystemic Therapy, MST, and we're trying to bring it to New Hampshire. I have a meeting right after this to talk about that, working with Moira O'Neill, the Office of the Child Advocate, and Joe Ribson from DCYF. It's an intensive therapy that wraps around families 24/7, 3 or 4 times a week. It's been shown to have really positive results. So we need to push for programs like this that really work with the family. So just keep your eyes out for MST. Hopefully coming.
I think we need to clone you. You are great. And what you were doing, I'm just like, yes. If we have 100 of her, boy, we can do this.
Well, MST is going to be great because it's 24/7. If you, in the middle of the night, heard your father yelling at your mother, you could just call and they would be there. It's been a proven great program in other parts of the country, and it seems to be working. So we're going to push for that in New Hampshire.
Good.
Yes.
Hi. I'm Gloria's husband. I just want to say I've been trailing around with Gloria all week, and I'm sort of her roadie. And she's spoken to students and journalists, and she went to the jail. I didn't go into the jail. And I'm just so pleased that this is the last thing she's doing, because this is really what the book is about to me and what she wrote it for, and to finish off with a group that's actually addressing these issues and working on it. I think it's just so appropriate that this is where we end this visit, and I just salute all of you who are in the trenches working against and trying to help this problem. So hats off to you.
Big friends, I think we are over time, but it's anything left from the panel that you want to share out into the universe?
I do. I just want to thank these two women for coming here. I'm not sure that I could have been as strong as you to be here and speaking, you know, especially, you know, a couple months sober. That's really some of the toughest time around, you know, never mind the drinking, the sobriety, new sobriety is rough. And you're here. I'm just in awe of the fact that you're here, and I mean that. Thank you so much. I'm wishing you the best.
All right. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much, everyone.
Is he icky? Overlap.